Hey everyone! Welcome to the first of the series Mythic Plus Dungeon Tanking Guides, where I will guide you through a route that I find works with random players and explain the most important abilities and mechanics from a tank's perspective. Note that since we are at the beginning of the season while making, the route might crystallize a bit differently in due time. The goal is to give you the confidence to start tanking keys or get a better understanding of what's going on around you while doing so. For this one, we will be starting off with Theater of Pain. Entering the dungeon, if you have a way to skip the first 3 mobs, it is common to do so and pull the Raging Bloodhorn along with the first bosses. This lets you clear the initial pack at the end, just before the last boss spawns, maximizing the downtime during its roleplay sequence. However, in random groups, it's often easier to deal with them at the start to avoid confusion. The Raging Bloodhorn has an enrage mechanic called Raging Tantrum, which can be fully mitigated with a Soothe. If you're pulling it with the boss, having a Soothe in your group is highly recommended to manage the extra incoming damage. Right at the start of the dungeon, you'll face Affront of Challengers, a fight involving 3 bosses that should ideally be killed around the same time. This helps mitigate their phase-based abilities, which trigger at 30% health. And if you're looking for a kill order, the best approach is to start off with Satel the Accursed. His One with Death ability grants him a 30% damage shield, making him much harder to kill, and while active, he cannot be interrupted, which can put extra pressure on your healer. Second, Desia the Decapitator. Every 15 seconds, she casts Mortal Strike, a tank buster that should be mitigated as much as possible. And at 30% health, she enrages, which can be soothed. If that's not an option, be ready to pop major defensives to survive the increased damage. And last, Paceran the Virulent deals heavy AoE damage and casts Decaying Breath, a massive frontal cone attack. He also drops noxious spores under every player's feet. To avoid cluttering the arena, stay grouped loosely and backpedal around the room to create space as you move. Once the bosses are defeated, the arena opens up, pulling you into the lower part of the dungeon, where you can choose which of the 3 wings to start off with. If you've run this dungeon in previous seasons, you'll notice a significant improvement in ability telegraphing, making mechanics easier to read and react to. In this run, I followed my team into the Halls of Might. Depending on your group's confidence and gear, you can choose to pull the first pack together with the mini-boss. However, when running with random players, I prefer to clear the pack first and then move over to the mini-boss once they are nearly dead. The mini-boss is randomly chosen from one of 2 options. You will either receive Dokig the Brutalizer or Nektara the Mangler. Dokig has a tank buster ability called Savage Flurry, which should be mitigated. And Nektara is generally easier for tanks, as she focuses on AoE damage and casts Interrupting Roar. In the next room, you will again encounter one of 2 potential mini-bosses, Harugia the Bloodthirsty or Heaven the Breaker. Harugia does Bloodthirsty Charge. Just make sure she doesn't face the hallway with the patrol. Next to that, she targets a random team member with Ricocheting Blade, which can be nullified by line of sight, so tanking her on the stairs will help doing so. If you face Heaven the Breaker, you should be aware of the tank buster Colossus Smash. It does quite a bit of damage initially, but also makes you take 50% increased physical damage, so any big defensive would make you a bit more self-sufficient. The hallway patrol is a bit more interesting due to the ancient captain in the middle. His commanding presence buffs the other mobs, increasing their damage by 25%, while reducing your group's AoE damage by 75%. To counter this, funnel all your damage into the captain first. This not only removes the buff faster, but also helps watching out for his demoralizing shout, which should always be interrupted. If your group struggles with this mechanic, it can put a strain on the healer. so play defensively and keep an eye on his mana going into the next pool. Next up is the last of the 3 mini-bosses you'll encounter in this wing, and can again be either of 2 options. Agent Nevermore does the same ricocheting blade as Harugia, so if the bad stuff on the ground allows it, tanking him on the stairs will help with potential line of sighting. Wreck the Unhardened is the other option you could face. His Unbalancing Blow ability will do damage immediately, but also lowers your dodge, parry and block chance completely by 100%, so any major cooldown is spent wisely here, since you probably won't really need it for the next few minutes. Arriving at the final part of this wing, you'll face Xav the Unfallen. Personally, I find his damage pretty easy to anticipate, and his mechanics are actually fairly relaxed. One of the first things he'll do is throw down an oppressive banner. You can help burn this down, since his attacks on you don't splash onto your teammates. Get rid of it quickly, because you don't want to be slowed for what's coming next. Xav cycles through 3 easily avoidable ground AoEs. Crushing Slam is a big straight line frontal attack, which you can easily sidestep. Deafening Crash is a large circular AoE attack around him, which is easily avoided by running back in a straight line. While he prepares these abilities, there will be no damage on you. Last we have Massive Cleave, a big 180 degrees frontal that, even when standing in the middle, can be avoided by just running a straight line through him. The only mechanic that doesn't concern you is Blood and Glory. At 100 energy, he'll pull 2 DPS onto the lower arena, where they have 45 seconds to duel. One of them must die before the time runs out, or the whole group gets a debuff. But no worries, both players will return safe and sound once it's over, so may the best man win. Moving on to the next wing, the Barrow of Carnage. The first pack can get pretty nasty, and personally, I like to pull the first set of mobs back just outside in the hallway to avoid accidental pulls. You will face disgusting refuses who leap to random group members and cause quite a bit of AoE damage. The big Putrid Butcher does 2 hard-hitting abilities on you. The first, Tank Buster, is Devour Flesh and should be mitigated as much as possible, since his Chop ability does a lot of damage over time also, so playing defensive will help out the healer a lot. There are a few interrupts in this pack, of which the most important is coming from the Sludge Spewer. His Wither Discharge does a lot of AoE damage and debuffs the group. Lastly, we have the Diseased Horror, which isn't too hard to handle. If you have interrupts left over, you can interrupt his Meat Shield. And note his Decaying Strike, causing a debuff that lowers your health pool by 5%. Going into the next hallway, you can make quick work of the big Putrid Butcher and 2 Jumping Jimmies, because you know how to handle these already. After this small pack, you can go left and skip the big gas bag mob circling the room. Keep a watchful eye behind you, since this one often gets accidentally pulled. This one is just like the first pack of this wing. Running with random people, any AoE crowd controls are best saved at this point. Considering the downtime of the past few minutes, all cooldowns are up, and healers often struggle at the many Jumping Jimmies in the next pack, so locking those down would be your better option. Moving to the middle part of the hallway, you'll trigger a lot of Jumping Jimmies again, together with the big gas bag mob patrolling here. Most important thing to note on this gassy mob is the Vile Eruption, that causes a large avoidable cone of gassy bat going out the front and the back of this mob, and this should definitely be avoided. Once all the Jumping Jimmies are dead and the group is stable, just pull the gas bag together with the Butcher and Horror that make up the last pack of this wing before the boss. Gorechop however hectic at times, isn't that difficult if everyone huddles up a little bit, so you can easily pick up the jumping jimmies that jump on you during the fight. Gorechop is a hard-hitting nuisance that hits you with Hateful Strike roughly every 15 seconds, so having some mitigation up for that one is definitely needed. During the fight he will often lower the meat hooks on the sides. There will be 2 openings every time, and running through it you'll have another set of hooks to avoid. Just move sideways to do so. Note that while the hooks lower, the boss will pull everyone towards him and do a large tenderizing smash around him. Just stacking on him will make this barely noticeable and move as soon as you see the telegraphing on the ground. One thing to note is that while the hooks lower, 2 jumping jimmies come down alongside with them, and the difference between these and the jimmies you faced earlier is that these drop a big puddle of yuck once they die, so having everyone stacked up will help quite a bit. Other than that, it's just rinse and repeat. The last wing you'll brighten with your company is the Altars of Agony. Just at the start, you will have a hallway being bombarded with magical bad, and the easiest is to instruct your group to wait just outside while you pull most of the shackled souls wandering the aisle. Bring them back to the group and burn them down. Any AoE crowd control will be helpful, and doing it this way will make you able to cross the hallway without the bind soul debuff the souls do on everyone in the group. After that, go across the hallway and pull the last 3 souls onto the portal guardian hanging out in the next room. There will be a lot of magical damage going about, which the healer has to heal through, so any magic mitigation you have will lessen the strain on the healer. Once the guardian is down, a key in the form of an orb will drop and can be dropped on either the left or the right side before the portal. I usually just keep left, and depending on which you choose, the order on which edge you'll encounter will change. This run we kept left, but had you chosen right, you'll encounter 2 bone mages. Don't get fooled by the name though, their bone spear attack will do massive physical damage, so anticipate accordingly. On the first platform, you'll encounter some more slowing souls and a soulbinder. Most important thing to keep an eye on is the necrotic bolt volley. Next to doing a lot of AoE damage, it also absorbs a lot of healing, making it troublesome for the healer, so this needs to be interrupted at all times. The next pack will have a lot of damage going about on both you and the rest of the group. And with mobs on either side of the platform, the risk of accidental pulls are looming. Make it your responsibility to interrupt the Soulbinder's necrotic bolt volley, since missing this interrupt will likely overwhelm the healer and result in a wipe. Also, make sure to mitigate the physical damage of the Bone Mage's Bone Spear correctly, and using major defensives during the Portal Guardian Soulstorm is definitely warranted. Ideally, the healer shouldn't have to worry about you and able to focus on the other players, since not everyone preemptively use their defensives where they should. You will also face a large platform with 2 nefarious dark speakers. Again, tank them in the middle of the platform and feel free to use your interrupt to position them correctly. The main thing to worry about on these are the dead winds, which, if hit you, will likely knock you off the platform or into one of the packs on the sides. Mind to not stand too close into their hitbox, since that might still cause you to get hit by one of these, even though standing behind the mob. Lastly, avoid the Curse of Desolations, marked with a purple circle on the ground, because getting hit by one of these will get you feared and sometimes causes people to run into one of the packs also on the platform. The last platform before the boss combines a few of the mobs we've already seen before in the wing. Avoid getting knocked off the platform by dead winds, mitigate the Mage's Bone Spear, and make it your job to interrupt the necrotic bolt volley from the Soulbinder. The second to last boss in this dungeon is Kul'Tharok. This boss isn't too difficult to tank either. Don't stand too close because of the big green puddle of bad beneath him, and avoid the death spiral orbs floating around him. You might be tempted to circle around the boss together with the orbs, but that just might cause confusion as soon as you get targeted by the necrotic eruption. Necrotic eruption is a straight line frontal that needs to be faced away from everyone else in the group. Just after the frontal, he will start casting Draw Soul, which will target everyone in the group and spawn a ghosty that will do massive AoE once it reaches the boss. Stack up somewhere so you can easily CC and cleave them down. The last ability to note is the Well of Darkness. This ability will target 2 players and will do massive damage to them and those standing close to them. This is not really a concern and easily avoided. The rest is just rinse and repeat. Heading on to the last boss. Once you get upstairs, a roleplay event will trigger introducing the last boss. If at the start of the dungeon you have chosen to skip the first mobs, then this is the best time to down them and make good use of the time before the boss is active. Compared to the other bosses in this dungeon, Mordretha is one of the more difficult bosses to tank in general in my opinion. Position her at the side of the arena, leaving enough room to move around her. Reaping Scythe is the tank buster ability to watch out for and will occur roughly every 15 seconds. Dark Devastation is an outward beam attack that you can avoid by circling around her. After this, she will spawn a Grasping Rift that pulls everyone towards it, making it somewhat more difficult to handle the Manifest Death ability that follows immediately afterwards. Manifest Death targets everyone with an AoE debuff, doing damage and spawning a Deathwalker mob that keeps blasting everyone with death bolts as long as it lives. To deal with this correctly, move her away from the Grasping Rift as soon as you see it and then huddle up near each other, overlapping the AoE circles as much as possible without hitting your team members. Any interrupts and spell logs will help to stack the Deathwalkers and down them as soon as possible. Important to note, as a tank, that while doing all this, never to forget to prioritize mitigating the Reaping Scythe. At around half health, there will be some additional abilities to deal with, making your positioning even more important. The Echo of Battle will spawn some fighting ghosties that will cleave you if you come near, and Ghostly Charge will spawn 4 ghostly riders at opposite ends of the arena, charging across. These should be avoided at all times, and any positioning you can do to help your team is very welcome. This fight can get pretty hectic, and personally I find this to be one of the more difficult ones to handle as a tank. However, once you get the hang of the timings and positioning, you'll be just fine. This concludes the Theater of Pain Mythic Plus Dungeon Tanking Guide for Season 2 of The War Within. I truly hope this has been helpful, and if so, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. I will be working hard on covering the other dungeons as well, but as a father and working man, my time is limited, so please bear with me. For now, I'd like to thank you for watching, and you'll hear me in the next video.